My name is Julia. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on Wabanaki land. A quick visual description is that I'm a Palestinian American white woman with short brown hair, pink bangs, a keffiyeh headband, and clear glasses. My background is the Palestinian flag, and it has a Centering Palestine logo on it. This event is organized by COVID Isn't Over community volunteers, including Palestinian, Jewish, and ally contributors. I'm going to briefly go over our community agreements, and then I'll give the news update. If you've ever come like maybe 5-10 minutes late and you get stuck in the waiting room for a sec, that's because we use content warnings during the news segment and we pause the admittance just so that we don't have to keep saying that content warning. Once the content warning is lifted, we let folks back in. So if you ever get stuck in the waiting room for a little bit, don't worry, we will let you in. Let's go over those community agreements briefly. You can always look at the full version on the link in the chat. So we are a COVID cautious event organized by COVID cautious folks, and we ask that attendees be respectful of that intersection. What that comes down to is that we're not discussing organizing or protesting in ways that don't take really important accessibility measures like COVID precautions. We are a pro-Palestine space, of course. We support the liberation of Palestine and are anti-Zionist. We do not tolerate anti-Semitism or Islamophobia of any kind. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. Zionism is a settler colonial nationalist movement, and geopolitical powers like the US and Israeli governments have really tried to make Zionism and Jewishness synonymous, but this is inaccurate and only serves to further harm Jewish and Palestinian communities. We center marginalized voices and oppressed groups, particularly Palestinians right now. We use content warnings, like I mentioned, when we discuss any distressing news or topics. And in terms of chat etiquette, everyone does a nice job. But as a reminder, we just ask that comments stay focused on the task at hand, so just that we don't derail any important action items from being completed. With that, I'm going to suggest you open up the packet that's in the chat. Zoom loves to be frustrating and sometimes won't let you copy things from the chat. So if you want to just not have to deal with that glitch, go ahead, open up the packet. All our information is there. I am going to put our general content warning in effect for the news section, so we'll stop admittance for just a few minutes. If you want to turn your volume down on your computer, you won't have to hear this, and we'll put in the chat when we're done so that you can turn your volume back up. If you have kids in earshot, I would definitely put on headphones. Our sessions in general are not particularly geared for kids. All right, let's get into our news section. Okay, our first topic today is day 165. In terms of updates on the death toll from Al Jazeera, at least 31,729 people have been killed in Gaza and more than 73,792 wounded. In the West Bank, at least 435 people have been killed and 4,650 people injured. I wanted to follow up from last week. The uncommitted voting campaign has continued to spread across the US, which is super exciting. It began in Michigan, and it is continuing to see success as different US states take advantage of their particular uncommitted or similar voting laws. You can check out Swing States for Peace on Instagram, or you can check out Al Jazeera's latest update if you want to find out more. There is slow movement toward a ceasefire, but details are unclear. It's been really frustrating. It's been about a month of Biden and others hinting that a ceasefire of some sort is on the horizon. However, exact details are extremely murky at this point. The US has finalized a UN resolution that signals a ceasefire, and Biden has warned Netanyahu against invading Rafah. It remains to be seen if a strong ceasefire agreement can be reached by all parties at this point. And so far, the US's timid actions have not stopped Netanyahu from continuing his invasion into Rafah. As a reminder, Rafah is home to the Rafah crossing with Egypt, right? So the Egyptian president just a couple days ago strongly warned Netanyahu not to begin a ground invasion because regional tensions, like we've talked about a lot, are really growing there. Palestinians next, who are seeking aid, continue to face brutal attacks. Every day there are more reports of Palestinians who are literally seeking aid and shelter being attacked and killed by the IDF. You can catch up on this week's events from Let's Talk Palestine on Instagram or Democracy Now's article on the topic. The next topic, again, following up from last week or 2 weeks ago maybe, despite there being no solid evidence that UNRWA had ties to Hamas, the US, their defunding of this important aid agency seems like it might become permanent. It's really frustrating when we, are saying things like, let's defund police or let's have a ceasefire in Palestine. And apparently our politicians hear the opposite. And they're like, let's defund an important aid agency or ban TikTok. It's extremely frustrating right now that our politicians are not listening to us. So needless to say, we need to keep the pressure on. UNRWA does really important work. they should be getting that aid money restored. You can catch up on the details in that article there too. Next, in another really cool, bold move of solidarity, South Africa has announced that it will arrest any dual nationals fighting in Gaza. This has been a thing that's been getting media attention throughout, where some people are like going and volunteering for the IDF and that kind of thing. So South Africa, again, has said, no, we're not supporting starvation or genocide in Palestine. In pop culture news, creator Hannah Claire Smith explains why this boycott on Eurovision is so important right now. Even though I know the arts and entertainment industry can seem like very unserious compared to when we're talking about genocide, the boycott of Eurovision signals to world leaders that the public is refusing to tolerate Israel's action as normal, or like as something a normal, normal for a country to do. Watch that video if you want to learn more from her. That's like a topic that interests you. Just a couple more international topics before we move to our action section. I wanted to mention in Haiti, turmoil has continued to escalate as criminal gangs now control most of their capital. And in the middle of this chaos, this is the headline you might have heard, the prime minister has resigned. So this leaves the country's political system in a very kind of vulnerable spot. In terms of updates on Sudan, this week, the Sudanese army captured important radio and TV headquarters from the RSF. If you want to do a better deep dive, go ahead and read that article from the Sudan Tribune. What's positive-ish here is that it does restore communications power to some degree, which is helpful because there's been such a media blackout. But the RSF was also using those facilities as like one of their important kind of headquarters. So while the Sudanese army definitely has its faults, it is generally considered the lesser of two evils. And so these kind of developments will definitely reshape the situation in Sudan. So for now, this might be a step in maybe a little less chaos, hopefully. And Sudanese civil leaders at this point are also really urging the international community to take clear action on a UN ceasefire resolution. Lastly, our updates on Congo. You can check out the latest posts from a couple different sources. I try to make sure there's like Instagram and non-Instagram so that everyone can access them. But in the DRC, 7 million people have been displaced and the UN has named it an unprecedented crisis. Check out Congo Friends for more news and updates, as well as information on like how to donate or how to support different campaigns. I did include a really simple petition linked in that section of the packet that's in the chat now. And it's for US folks, and it's a super simple petition that calls for the US to stop funding conflict in Congo. So that's a great one to sign if you have time. With that, let's lift the content warnings. We're going to go to our action section next, and we haven't done this in a while. We're going to stay in one big group for our action section tonight. We are never about like forcing anyone to do anything they don't want to, so you have no obligation to do any of these. It's totally just an opportunity for you. I will walk us through this first action item. So this is from Protect Palestine, which I haven't run into before now, but we have some really cool options to email your reps. It should take 5 minutes or less. Pretty simple. If you're in the US, open up that Protect Palestine link and it'll be action 01. You'll see the first one is email your reps and you can put your information in. Similarly, if you're in the UK, there is the Voices in Europe for Peace campaign. With all of these, even if you've already done this once, you can do it again because they're email campaigns, not petitions. So in this case, the more emails, the better. Similarly, I did include an Australian one. The Australian one is actually more specifically about the UNRWA funding. So that's great. That's really important too. This is Canada for Palestine. They do such a good job about updating it. So if you scroll down for Canadians, you're looking for the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So that is the third name on that contact list if you scroll. And then if you scroll a little bit further, just copy and paste the March 19th email script. So they are amazing and they update it daily, and you can also do a French translation if you prefer. So go ahead and copy that into your email, and generally the Minister of Foreign Affairs is probably the first one you should email, but of course you can email the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister as well. That's not going to hurt. You can always do BCC. That's a fun little corporate trick, which you can send it to multiple people at once. So go ahead, pick the link and country that is appropriate for you. Okay, I think I'm going to go to the next slide. This one also comes from Protect Palestine, but anyone can do it. So this one doesn't matter your location, I believe. It's a petition, right? So you can put in your name, email, and your address, and then like it lets you pick the country. So this one is up for everyone to do. I encourage you on your own time, if you scroll on that Protect Palestine website, there are 5, 6, 7, there's a bunch of 3-minute actions that they've organized very nicely. And the majority of them do not rely on what country you're in. So I definitely encourage you to do that on your own time. And I think this is something we learned in a previous week with our petitions. You just need to fill out that first form section and submit. Sometimes, like with Action Network, it might prompt you to set up an account, and that's totally up to you. That's not necessary once you've filled out that first screen. So this is a topic we're going to touch on a little bit more in our education section, but I wanted to take a moment now just to boost this if you are on Instagram and you're comfortable using Instagram. So this is to help boost this post on a liberatory Ramadan. You don't have to be Muslim to boost this post. Right now, I think it had about 550 likes, like 550-ish. And, Instagram, social media, we know are brutal. Like the more likes and saves and shares, the better. So I thought, even if you're not Muslim, I think it's appropriate to help boost this post. So go ahead, if you're able and willing, you can like the post, you can save it, you can share it on your story or something like that. It's really cool. This QT BIPOC therapist created this post that has info about boycotts, places to donate, and encourages COVID cautious iftars, meaning like breaking a fast during Ramadan. So I thought like that was, so much of that is it's all in line with what we do here. So I thought it was too good not to share. And if you can't access Instagram for whatever reason, this therapist also has a link tree. So you can like check that out and see their resources there too. Someone described this in our feedback form as action co-working, and I'm obsessed. I still really like that description. It's my favorite description so far. Definitely feel free to refer back to this packet if you didn't get enough time or you want to do more of the actions from Protect Palestine. The last thing I wanted to share, you really don't have to do anything. I just wanted to introduce you to this action. I think this was a volunteer submission. It is called the Hasbara Tracker. And so I am putting a content warning before you click on this link. This resource debunks false claims, and so sometimes these claims are going to include like graphic or violent headlines. There are no like images or videos, so it's actually kind of an interesting mix if you are looking for something that specifically doesn't have those images and videos. As far as I could tell from clicking around, it was just like text. But what this site does and what this project is working on, they're working on expanding, is it goes through and debunks these false claims and propaganda that we're getting from like the Israeli army. What I really appreciate as a Palestinian and as someone who has seen this propaganda like over time, it not only is like debunking, the lies we're seeing very presently or the, falsehoods we're seeing presently, but it also is referencing, oh, look, here's where they did the same thing before, like this, the IDF, the IOF is using the exact same tactic as last time, as this time. And I think that can be really helpful just contextually to understand what's happening. And I would definitely encourage you to bookmark it if you're interested, especially as it comes to like these kind of gotcha talking moments you might run into. I think this is such a helpful resource to be able to really debunk these completely false claims. So thank you for that submission to the person who submitted that, and I hope it's helpful. So you really don't have to, you're not sharing or signing anything, but if that is interesting to you, again, it is text-based with some more serious headlines, but if you bookmark that on your computer, I do think that is a good resource to have. With that, I think I'm going to go to our education segment. Kevin has done an awesome ecological education segment for us. This was, I believe, a community like question submission, which is super cool. Before we get into that, I just wanted to touch base a little bit about supporting Palestinians and Muslims during Ramadan. So just wanted to share, because Ramadan started on March 11th, and so just wanted to take the opportunity to share a little background and information. I am referencing this great post called Supporting Muslim Colleagues During Ramadan. I think it's very applicable whether it's the workplace or not. If you didn't know, Ramadan is a time for spiritual purification achieved through fasting, self-sacrifice, reflection, and prayer. During Ramadan, extra time is spent on performing prayers, reflecting on oneself, sacrificing worldly desires to strengthen the soul. Muslims around the world will fast from pre-dawn to sunset. To say have a blessed Ramadan, you can say Ramadan Kareem or Ramadan Mubarak. Like I said, it started March 11th and goes to April 11th. It works on a lunar calendar, so It's not going to be in March next year. It does change every year. And I think, oh, I did the math. It's going to be quite a while, maybe 6 or 7 years. A lot of the holidays will line up in December again, which is always fun. But Eid is the holiday that is at the end of Ramadan, and it marks an end of fasting, and it's can be a number of days of celebration with family and friends. So that is the exciting closure to it all at the end of the month. Lastly, I do want to put a reminder to educate yourself and, of course, be kind to your Muslim friends or colleagues during Ramadan. I did want to put a note that sometimes not everyone knows. One of the wonderful things in Islam is that it makes it very clear that no one should fast if it's a harm to their health, right? So this is for pregnant people, or say you have diabetes, or some kind of medical condition where it's going to be very dangerous to fast. It's very clear that you shouldn't be doing that. That's not the point. So if you have a Muslim friend who isn't fasting, it is kind of rude to ask them why, because it could probably be something personal or private medical information. So if you ever do run into someone who's not fasting, it's just politest not to ask. Yes, exactly. For kids, elderly, anyone who is breastfeeding, absolutely. So context for if you see folks fasting or not, definitely check out that full post. They do a nice in-depth infographic as well. We wanted to talk briefly about Ramadan during war. So there are lots of challenges for Palestinians in the diaspora, in the West Bank, in Palestine, and Gaza. So Ramadan and Eid are important and really beloved holidays for Muslim Palestinians, whether facing genocide in Gaza or violence and surveillance in the West Bank and Palestine. Feelings about Ramadan are understandably very complicated right now. So when facing suffering, Muslims are reminded that God is always near and always with the oppressed. But there's also a lot of disappointment and fear that as this genocide is taking away experiences and celebrations that folks might have been hoping for. For Muslims and Palestinians in diaspora, this year's Ramadan is a really strong reminder of the Islamic duty to charity and to supporting the oppressed. There's this very well-written article by Muslim writer Mahan Misra, and it's called The Challenges Muslims Face During Ramadan This Year. So I recommend, it's not that long and it's free, so go ahead and read that article too if you want. We also wanted to talk about challenges for Arabs, whether or not they are Muslim or Palestinian. So many non-Muslim Arabs across the globe hold a lot of solidarity with the Muslim community and the Palestinian community. Because of Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate, they've just continued to rise this year. Arabs of all religions and ethnicities can face discrimination, and there's a very strong sense of solidarity in response to the West's really othering of brown, Arab, and Muslim communities. So this is also an important time to make sure that we're supporting Black Arabs and Muslims, as they're often completely left out of our narratives. And lastly, there are challenges for Muslims, regardless of whether or not they're Arab. So an important part of Muslim culture, and especially Ramadan, is charity and solidarity with the oppressed. So this year's tragedies and interconnected struggles definitely weigh heavily for the Muslim community. Ramadan support. So we wanted to talk about how you can support different things. So for Palestinians, whether in the diaspora, West Bank, just anywhere, we always talk about UNRWA, right? They do a lot of important work to, especially in this moment, really effectively get aid to Palestinians, and their funding has been drastically cut. So definitely, if you're able to support them now during Ramadan or in the future, that's super helpful. Or even just sharing information about them, because I totally understand that if you don't have funds right now. We also always talk about PCRF. They specifically have a campaign going right now to feed kids for Ramadan. There's a great Twitter thread. I'm trying to be better. I know we have a lot of Twitter users. I'm trying to be better about the Twitter links. So there's a great Twitter thread of a lot of different places, a whole list of places you can donate to support Palestinians. And I did want to mention too that Muslims are suffering globally, not just in Palestine. So you can check out those donation links for the DRC as well as some for Sudan as well. I also, again, like we mentioned in the last slide, in terms of interrupting Islamophobia and just kind of tools that we can use, whether we're talking about Palestinians or Arabs of any religion or Muslims of any ethnicity, there's some 3 great resources I wanted to mention that I recommend you browse when you have the time. So the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding has a whole toolkit on countering Islamophobia. They start with a description of what it is. They're very in-depth. I definitely recommend that. I also recommend this article on anti-Palestinian hate in the US. This was written shortly after there were Palestinian students in Vermont who were shot, and that was really scary and one of the reflections of anti-Arab hate that is on the rise in America. So especially for US citizens, I would read that. And lastly, we've been talking about this for a few weeks because it is exciting to see how Michigan's Uncommitted campaign has been just making waves. So you can read that article about how Michigan's Arab community is fighting back against anti-Arab hate. So those are really great reads. The two articles linked are not that long too if you want something shorter. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin. I use he or they pronouns. I'm calling from Muskogee land. Let's see, I have dark brown hair and a beard and glasses, and I am white, Ashkenazi, and mixed, most likely, mostly British Isles. All right, we will go ahead and dive on in. So this is actually part one of a presentation on Israeli assaults on the environment in Palestine. We're going to focus on Gaza today, and then in April, actually the day after Earth Day, we will focus on the West Bank. Okay, so you'll notice this education section is not titled Environmental Impacts of Assaults on Palestine. So I just want to draw your attention to that. And the reason why this section is titled the way that it is because the environmental damage in Palestine is not just collateral damage, but it's often intentional. We will discuss this more when we discuss greenwashing in part two in April. And then also in part two, we will talk more about the West Bank. Okay, so in terms of Gaza, there are a lot of interconnected environmental assaults going on right now. A lot of the topics that we'll discuss momentarily are interconnected. So to a certain degree, dividing topics isn't really possible. With this caveat, what we've done is we've organized this section around water, land, air, and greenhouse gases. And then water and land are further subdivided. So in terms of water, we'll be talking about how the siege on Gaza creates conditions that lead to contamination of the Gazan aquifer and sea. We'll talk about the impacts of the flooding tunnels in Gaza with seawater and impacts on marine ecology. And then in terms of land, we'll be talking about attacking agriculture and impacts on native species, herbicide spraying, the introduction of weeds, and scorched earth policies / destroying soil, and then also / the separation wall, and white phosphorus and other toxic munitions. Okay, so in terms of how the siege and containment on Gaza creates conditions that lead to contamination of the Gazan aquifer and sea, I tried to simplify this as much as possible. So essentially, the siege and containment creates conditions where access to water is limited, overcrowding is forced by the containment and the separation wall, and then there are also limits on the ability of municipalities in Gaza to handle solid waste and wastewater. So what this leads to then is aquifer contamination by both sewage and saltwater intrusion. And what this means is that actually only like 3 to 4% of the water in the Gazan aquifer is actually considered potable or fit for human consumption. And this was actually before the latest assaults on Gaza. Waste, like solid waste, also poses risk of disease from bacteria and toxins, and also insects and rodents that are attracted to the waste as well. And then in terms of forced overcrowding, that then puts more demands on the aquifer. So there is actually going to be aquifer collapse at some point, and this will affect humans. It will also affect the collapse of tree crops, which are already in motion by Israel, which we'll talk about momentarily. And this will all affect biodiversity. There are additional links on this in the chat that you can follow. Okay, so people have also been hearing about the flooding of Gazan tunnels with seawater, right? So it's been done in the current assaults. It actually has been done before the current assaults as well, actually by Egypt. It may violate international law. Thing with pumping seawater into Gazan tunnels is that the soil in Gaza is sandy, it's porous. So you put seawater in the tunnels and it gets into the aquifer. So you have further contamination of the aquifer with salt water. When Egypt actually, introduced or flooded tunnels with seawater earlier, there was actually ground collapse. Doing this on a wider scale obviously has implications then in terms of farther ground collapse. That also has implications in terms of rebuilding because the ground is unstable. That makes rebuilding hard. And agriculture is also affected. You have muddy and brackish fields. And more info is in the links. Let's see, in terms of marine ecology. So with the assaults, the municipalities in Gaza, their abilities to handle wastewater and treat wastewater is impacted, is limited. That means there's more untreated wastewater going into the sea. That then leads to algae blooms. And the thing about algae blooms are actually a problem in many, many parts of the world. And what they do, why they're so dangerous, is they suck oxygen from the water. So then you end up having these dead zones, massive dead zones, essentially. People who fish in Gaza are suspecting that these algae blooms might push fish farther out from the zone that fishing is allowed. There has also an environmental impact assessment done in 2015 after 2014 attacks on Gaza also noted decrease in some fish populations, in particular sardines, gilthead breams, and striped sea bream ears, and then also increase in some fish populations and some new fish. So rabbitfish, for example, rabbitfish are actually from the Pacific and Indian Oceans. They've been seen. It's suspected that they're attracted by the algae blooms because they eat algae. They're actually venomous. They have venom in their spine. And there's also been observation of fish from the Arabian Gulf, which came from the Suez Canal, which is actually interesting, I think, to note, given that the Suez Canal was a big reason why England supported the establishment of the State of Israel. There was, geopolitical concerns around the Suez Canal and also wanting to get Jewish people out of Europe. And I do also just want to note that fish population changes can also be due to climate change. So you have a bunch of stuff that's most likely interacting quite synergistically. Okay, so then in terms of attacks on agriculture and impacts on native species, okay, this is 2 slides here, sorry about that. So the first thing is there are buffer zones that are 300 meters or more from the separation wall where land has been bulldozed. That's caused a significant loss of farmland. There's also soil degradation. This comes from compaction from heavy machinery, bulldozers, tanks, etc. And also the soil is degraded from toxins from bombing. In terms of compaction, it's pretty significant. It can actually reduce micropores in soil by 60 to 75%. So that's a lot. And let's see, flooding is also an attack. So Israel opened dam gates in 2020 to cause agricultural flooding. 1 square kilometer of farmland sunk, and bees and chickens also drowned in that. There was a loss of $500,000 of crops. While we don't know reports right now of Israel opening dam gates to cause flooding, I don't think any of us would be surprised if that were to happen, at some point later this year, next year, whenever. This is also interesting. So an analysis of satellite photos in early December of 2023 showed that 22% of Gaza's farmland had been destroyed. And that percentage is most likely increased. Okay, so then here's a second part slide on this. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about tree crops, and these this has a little bit more information to kind of parse out. So, gosh, if you kind of just imagine going back in time a bit here, Gaza used to be full of citrus trees, citrus orchards. Palestinians were growing Jaffa oranges or sweet oranges since the 1800s. Israel had bulldozed many orange orchards. This started before the Oslo and Madrid talks, but it also continued through them. And Israel was claiming that the orange groves hid terrorists, destroying the orange groves, and then also economic and security conditions of siege and containment together forced many farmers to change to cheaper non-tree crops. This was, because they were worried that trees were a liability in terms of their safety with the Israeli military. Um, and also, there's just, economically, you can sometimes get more out of kind of cheaper non tree crops. And with tree crops gone, soil erosion is an issue. Another tree crop that many people associate with Palestine is olives. So, olive trees have and are also destroyed by Israel under the guise of ferreting out terrorists. Destruction of olive trees also happened during the 1990s negotiations, so during Oslo. Security concerns, the same security concerns around being targeted by the military, prohibit replanting. And there's also economic concerns too, because olive trees take decades to bear fruit. So if you're needing to bring in funds immediately, it's going to be harder with olive trees. And then, also as with destroying orange trees, destroying olive trees leads to soil erosion. A big thing too about olive trees, I don't know if a lot of people know this, they're actually really climate protective. So 1 liter of olive oil translates to absorbing about 11 kilograms of carbon dioxide. And this is done by the olive tree bark. And there are implications in terms of biodiversity. So with a lot of the tree crops, you would have other plants growing in these orchards. So they're not monocultures traditionally. And so the olive groves themselves have actually provided habitat for birds such as the Eurasian jay, the green finch, hooded crow, masked shrieky, Palestine sunbird, sardine warbler, wild pigeon, bulbuls, partridges, goldfinch, and curlews. That I know that's a lot. And other animals supported by tree orchards with habitat include rabbits, foxes, wolves, and wild cats. And then also, just if you want to kind of imagine other trees growing in these olive orchards, other trees that oftentimes are there are Aleppo pine, which are not the same pine as the pine that the Jewish National Fund has been planting, which is the European pine. We'll talk about that in April. That's actually very environmentally destructive. Let's see, almond, Palestine buckhorn, piney hawthorn, and fig trees. And moving on with the land assaults here, land impacts. So spraying herbicides. Israel began aerial spraying of herbicides, which is less precise than mechanical spraying. And so the herbicides are a mix of glyphosate, also known as Roundup, Oxygal, and Diurex. So Israel began aerial spraying these herbicides along the Gazan border in 2014. Spraying ended in 2019, though, this is also something where I don't think anybody would be surprised if Israel does resume these sprayings. Before spraying, wind direction was checked by lighting a tire on fire to see where the smoke was going. In 2022, the Palestine Agriculture Ministry reported 14,000 dunams of agricultural land had been damaged, and the amount of herbicide that was sprayed was above the recommended European Union amount for drift. There's a convention, the Environmental Modification Convention, which was implemented in 1978. It limits the military use of herbicides, and it came about because people saw the health and environmental impacts of Agent Orange and napalm that the United States used in Vietnam. Israel has not signed the convention, and spraying along with bulldozing land can lead to desertification. Another thing to consider too is tanks and heavy machinery can also carry and introduce seeds of new plants to Gaza. A lot of seeds, are like prickly and burly and manage to get all over the place. So things can, attach to tires, attach, otherwhere on tanks. After Gaza was invaded in 2014, farmers reported unknown plants before that they had only seen by the border wall. They reported seeing these farther in Gaza. Farmers were reporting that these new plants damaged their crops. And then also unknown plants do raise concerns about invasive species that could harm native plants. In terms of scorched earth policies, destroying soil and the wall. So to just sum this up, some of the biggest ecological threats in Palestine are habitat fragmentation, land degradation, soil erosion, desertification, urbanization, climate change, invasive species, pollution, and tree destruction. So the separation wall that Israel has built around Gaza fractures and destroys habitat. Bombs also release a lot of heat, which can affect soil chemistry and structure. In terms of soil chemistry and structure, we know that severe fire damages soil by decreasing organic material, changing soil structure, the porosity of soil, the density of soil, damaging microbes in soil life, so like different bacteria and insects. It affects how much water the soil can hold, and it also alters carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and magnesium. After the 2014 attacks on Gaza, Gazans did report soil infertility in many areas and lower crop yields, as well as loss of wildlife and birds and loss of native herbs, including mallow, thyme, portulaca, and Palestine chamomile. And then also trees close to where bombing happened were damaged too, and had unknown diseases. And so that might be chemically induced. I also just want to make a note on toxic munitions, including white phosphorus. So using white phosphorus in urban areas breaks international law. It is very toxic for humans. It can also affect plants and other animals, both directly and by acidifying soil, which then damages plants and then farms and native ecosystems. The effects of white phosphorus on farmland can actually be seen in South Lebanon as well. Over 40,000 acres of farmland has been destroyed by Israeli shelling with white phosphorus. Other potentially illegal munitions that people have expressed concern about Israel using in Gaza include rocket rounds, depleted uranium, and dense inert metal explosives. And I do just want to note the use of these other munitions has not been verified in the current attacks on Gaza. And a concern, though, with the munitions that we know are being used, is that heavy metals can be introduced into Gaza's air, soil, and water. After the 2014 attacks on Gaza, elevated nickel, chromium, copper, cobalt, and lead was observed in soil samples from bombed areas. So in terms of also, thinking in terms of air, ammunition can also be a source of air pollution. So, you're getting these heavy metals that are being introduced, this is getting picked up and blown in the wind. And then also there's building destruction going on. And so there's toxic particulate matter that's, that's now dust. And, just also a note. So also, a study from Gaza after it was attacked in 2014, lead levels in the air were found to be elevated above World Health Organization limits. And this was found in areas that demolished building waste was hauled to and processed. And then, again, also another concern is that waste attracts insects and rodents. So that can also pose further health concerns, especially if we're thinking about potential for rodent droppings as well, to get aerolized and blown in the wind. Okay, so greenhouse gases. This is sobering. A conservative estimate suggests the first 2 months of the current attacks on Gaza released as much carbon as burning 150,000 or more tons of coal. This estimate considers making and detonating bombs and munitions and fuel from planes, tanks, and vehicles. It doesn't consider other greenhouse gases such as methane. And then of this estimate, a little less than half was attributed to the United States flying weapons to Israel. So this factored in 200 or more plane shipments of 10,000 tons of weapons using 50 million liters of fuel, generating 133,000 tons of carbon dioxide. And this was estimated as of December 4th of last year. In the beginning of January, the carbon cost of rebuilding 10,000 buildings in Gaza was estimated to take 30 million metric tons of greenhouse gases, which is about as much as New Zealand releases annually. And needless to say, the number of buildings destroyed since the beginning of the year has, of course, only increased, as has carbon emissions related to the attack on Gaza. Okay, so this slide is here just as a FYI, links going in the chat. Science for the People is accepting submissions for an upcoming issue focused on Palestine. And so they actually, will look at things like climate impacts in Palestine. And Al Jazeera also has a piece on olive trees, cultural meaning. And then I know you already have a lot of info in the links already, but I did just want to note a few sources that do deeper dives into these topics. I put them here in chronological order. So if you do want to dive a little bit more into some of this material, those links are available for you in the chat and the resource packet. Next week, we will be highlighting Palestinian feminist organizing, and also going into the chat is our feedback form if you'd like to offer feedback.